Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. My name is Jared Woodfill, and I am the new and improved version of Gary Pollan. Along with my good friend here, David Jones, we have an exciting topic for you tonight. It's Millennials in Politics. And who best to address that issue than some fabulous millennials? You're going to be hearing tonight from Amanda Edwards, a distinguished councilwoman at large, position number 4. We also have with us Mike Floyd, who I think is the youngest member of our panel. He serves on Pearland ISD Board of Trustees at a ripe old age of 19. And then next to Mike, to his right, is Ben Proler. Ben is the National Board of Directors for Maverick PAC. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us this evening.
For having us. What I know about each of you, to add a little bit to your resumes, is that people don't know about, just from Jared's brief introduction, is Amanda is on the Budget and Fiscal Affairs Committee of the City of Houston.
That's correct.
She went to Harvard. She was one of 10,000 staffers for Sheila Jackson Lee. Maybe it was a few less, I don't remember. And later on she'll get to explain why she was one of 15 people who voted against the mayor of Houston's tax rate. You'll be prepared for that.
You're here.
I'll be prepared for any question you have.
Okay. And Mike, I understand it, part of your race was involved a 6-year incumbent who you defeated and who had made an anti-Muslim slur.
Well, the 6-year incumbent and former board president who made an anti-Muslim slur and was actually making some anti-transgender slurs as well during the campaign.
Well, that's a great millennial subject too.
Yeah.
Ben Proler has the distinction of being a representative of big oil, Shell. Okay, he's with the the National Jewish Coalition.
Republican Jewish Coalition.
Well, even worse, Republican.
Hey, watch yourself
Republican
now.
Jewish Coalition, and was once familiar with Little Marco. We'll call him
Senator Rubio.
Senator Rubio. Okay.
Oh, you're taking a playbook from Donald Trump. Wow,
That's right,
I didn't know you were
right.
such a fan.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to add to the.
Thank
Ben is good at taking little jabs.
and can punch them back too. But
Yes.
there you go.
Well, let me start by asking all of you, because I mean, obviously, when I was party chair, one of the things that we really wanted to do was encourage young folks to get involved, millennials, because we knew that that was the next generation of leaders, our next governor, our next senator. Let's start with you, Amanda. What got you involved in politics in the first place, and when did you start?
A great question. I think involvement in your community is essential if you really want to see the change that you deserve in your community. And so to be a spectator in your community will lend itself for you also being on the end of decisions that have already been made. And what you want to do is be able to influence decisions, also be able to influence outcomes. And there's no better way to do that than to get involved. And so I started off as getting very involved in the nonprofit community. So not necessarily partisan politics, if you will, but more so just engagement in the things that connected with me as far as their mission was concerned. And so then, of course, extended from there and kind of decided that City Council was the space where I could have the most impact and actually follow my mission in terms of making a transformational difference in the city.
Well, like when you were growing up, was there a certain age where you said, one day I would love to run for office?
Oh, sure. I mean, when you're young, I mean, I've wanted to be everything from an elected official to a fashion designer to a lawyer to you name it. But I think in terms of over time developing a serious interest in that, understanding this connection with policy, I lost my father when I was in high school, and one of the things that I recognized in watching that whole situation unfold is understanding that policy does impact people's lives. And so understanding that from a more mature sense, I think, is important. And sometimes you have pivotal moments like that. I'd always been interested in public service generally, but having an interest in public service and making the leap into it they're totally different things. But taking advantage of opportunities to get involved early, I think, will help you identify where you fit on that spectrum.
Jared, don't you see by the choice of her tops that she's probably neglected her job for the last who knows how many weeks while the Astros have been playing? I mean, my gosh.
Well, I mean, one of the roles at the city is not only to make sure we're managing the affairs of the city, the business affairs, but also making sure that Houston stands out as one of the outstanding cities that it is in the city.
Well, Mike, let me ask you, what inspired you to run for office?
Well, I'll tell you this. In the 4th grade, I started writing petitions against my school and our lunch policy that we had. So it started so early.
You're an advocate then.
Right, you can imagine what the teachers thought. And then we kept doing petitions after petition. In 8th grade, we did a petition. My biggest petition was in 11th grade. We got over 6,000 signatures in a very small, relatively small community compared to Houston. But just seeing all the issues that we have in schools across the country, the issues we have in public education and its place in our future, that's something that inspired me to see all the inefficiencies we have from inside the classroom. That perspective, I think, is so valuable to bring to a governing body.
And you were actually running for office when you were still in high school?
Yeah, I ran my entire campaign while I was a senior in high school.
Yeah, and who did your homework?
Well, I did too, just like I'm doing now here at the University of Houston while actually governing at the same time.
Okay.
That's great.
And Ben, one of the things I've noticed about your career is you've been very instrumental in helping others get elected, whether that be the Rubio campaign, working with him for years, Ted Cruz, and so many others. And what inspired you to get involved?
Sure. Well, I first want to say I'm really lucky to be to my left with two young elected officials. I think that is so awesome. And if we can just get more people, and I think they're both an inspiration to getting more people in the arena. And it's a huge challenge. Getting in the arena is a different dynamic than being a volunteer. Honestly, what got me involved was a mentor. I had some folks that reached out to me and they said, you can run with this, you can be active and a volunteer and do it in your political arena that you believe in, the policies you believe in, the people you believe in. And it just kind of propelled. And it's like once you get started and you're fueled by somebody that has been there and done that and teaches you the lessons, it just opens up so many doors. So honestly, I opened up one door, another door opened, another door opened, so I've been very lucky. So I have helped people, but they've helped me in return as well.
And what I did was think through what I thought millennials were interested in, and you can tell me whether or what their beliefs are based on just general polling data. And Mike brought up one issue, which is, and I think it's true, that the millennial generation is certainly more gay and transgender friendly than the generations older than them, would be one thing I would say. I would say that Black Lives Matter is more of a millennial-led organization than it is a baby boomer organization. And I'm thinking that millennials are more concerned about whether or not our debt is killing us and whether or not programs such as Social Security and Medicare are going to be available to them. That's three of many that I thought about that you feel free to say I'm right or wrong on.
Well, so by and large, I think that you're right in the sense that millennials and those younger than millennials are far more accepting of people's of all different types. We're socially accepting. We want to go beyond the continual arguments we hear about color of skin and religion, and we want to actually start fixing the real issues that we're facing as a country. So like the debt, but we can't start talking about the debt if civil rights are not guaranteed for all of our people. And so that's what I think is the large push we see from young elected officials like Amanda, is that we have to first guarantee equality before we can start talking about financial issues.
Hillary Clinton would agree with you.
Yeah, that's true.
I would also say, though, that education is a big issue for millennials. And I say that because we are the generation that is active, that just got done with our education. Some are still involved in their education. So what are some innovative and creative ideas for reforming the education system? And we've been a part of that. Some of us are involved and active in different young professional organizations that support unique initiatives here in the city. But I've always believed that is a topic as well that really gets people fired up. And what I like about it is it's outside the box. We can think creatively and bring new dynamics to the table that aren't there today.
And you know what I've noticed too, though, with respect to millennials, a lot of them are libertarians. And you see a lot of folks that supported Rand Paul, a lot of folks that supported his dad in the past, and then with respect, you see a lot of them supporting Bernie Sanders too. And so they are not necessarily lining up behind traditional party candidates, traditional Democratic or Republican Party candidates. And I've noticed that amongst millennials. Have you seen the same thing?
I think that's absolutely the case. I think, I get the fortune of having an opportunity to serve in an office that is nonpartisan in nature. Certain ideas of managing a city don't have anything to do with being a Republican or a Democrat. It's just a sound management. And I think when you get to tear down the labels and not look at colors like if you're red or blue, and analyze things along those lines, I think you get to an opportunity to really have dialogue, have discourse, and truly derive at solutions to problems through collaboration. And I think there's an interest in trying to collaborate. And looking back at history, there have been some very, collaborations that have taken place with groups and populations that you would otherwise not necessarily think would collaborate with each other. And I think building upon those past experiences to now create solutions to problems that exist today is the way that we have to go forward.
And is that something you would recommend for the Black Lives Matter group, is to collaborate with other, and am I correct in thinking that it is a younger group of people that are mostly organized and aggressive in their approach to the Black Lives Matter issue?
No, I don't think it's necessarily limited to a millennial generation. I mean, certainly its founding was there, but it has spread to a real strong push for people across the country to really understand and recognize the issues of brutality in the country. I think now, because it is cross-cutting, you do see more and more people doing more coalition building, and I think coalition building is going to be the way. It's been the way of the past, and I think it will be the way of the future in terms of looking across groups and seeing what you have more in common, but also recognizing those spaces where there's opportunity to improve. And I think in that case, there's issues of brutality that's been put to the forefront of our dialogue and discourse that really are being focused on from a wide spectrum of people.
Right. One of the things about millennials, we are the most diverse generation the country's ever had. So with that, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential to cross different boundaries that sometimes might have existed. So I'm very optimistic and hopeful about the future and how those parties and different people can come together in unique ways.
Well, and that's an excellent point, because I think you are a very diverse group. In fact, we're seeing a large number of millennials in the evangelical church. We're seeing a large number of millennials that are pro-life. And at the same point, we're seeing just the opposite happening. So you guys are so diverse. And it's a wide range of age groups when you talk about millennials. So how do we define it in terms of an age? Because I know we talked a little bit about that earlier. What is a millennial when you're looking at the actual age span?
So I'll take that as the old millennial. As the old millennial on the panel. I know you didn't set it up to make me say that, but my understanding is that the thought was years ago there were articles written about the generation that was going to be graduating in the year 2000 and beyond, and so that became the beginning of this millennial stamp, if you will. And so it has, I think, morphed into a very broad swath of people. I'm not sure where the end date is, but I think people who graduate in 2000, but I'm not quite sure where it ends. Can you guys help me out? Are you guys millennials or something else?
I've heard that it's anybody who became an adult after 2000. Which leads
so
us
18.
Yeah, which
Well,
leads us.
I can tell you is that I am classified as a Generation Z.
Oh,
Okay,
and that gives me some worry because I don't know what comes after Generation Z.
You're not excused from.
Right.
You still have, but after 2000, you would be the generation that has seen nothing but 17 years of war. How much of that 17 years of war has influenced your views on foreign policy and the mistakes made and your actual concern for the authority of the government who has perpetrated this 17-year war to no end?
I think so much has changed, in our years of upbringing, right? The world is so dynamic. So what I think is interesting about millennials, and it applies to all topics really, is as the world just keeps continuing to change and change and change, we've been at the forefront of so many different technologies and innovative and creative ways of solving problems. So it's neat. I think we approach problems in a different manner, and so I think we study history in a unique way. We've lived during a unique time in history, and moving forward, I just think, given all that we've been exposed to and the dynamics of the world, it'll be interesting to see kind of the problems that we'll be able to solve.
Well, you're absolutely right. My entire life has been conscious life post 9/11. All that I can remember has been post 9/11. 2 wars, one launched on fraudulent charges, a great recession we've had, and a lot of racial tension in this country. And so, I think that goes back to the point you were making earlier, is that people are sick and tired of this, especially young folks. We want to see change, and that's why you're seeing a rejection of the typical status quo politics. You saw large amounts of young people, I believe, supporting Senator Sanders. I think it was 70% or some historically large number. And same with Donald Trump was that, and Hillary Clinton didn't get that support because there was just a desire for a change just in both policy and in personality. So
Did I read correctly that the gentleman that you defeated was a Republican?
Yeah.
With the endorsement of Pete Olson, the congressman from that area?
and my local state representative.
Oh, you went up against everybody.
Yeah, we took on a whole system, and we were the underdogs in every single way imaginable. But we worked hard, and I think that's proven, that you've seen that as well, is that when you work hard and you put hard work in and you go to people talking about issues rather than, oh, I should be here because I'm on the red team or on the blue team. When you go to them and talk about these are the real issues we're facing, that resonates with people.
And
I think that's what you saw with Senator Sanders and with, Donald Trump to a different extent.
And I think that's for people who are interested in public service, I think that's often the missing link, is that they think that running for office or public service is about them. And it has absolutely nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with the people that you're serving. And to the extent that you understand and appreciate that, I think that's when you connect with voters and actually deliver the type of public service that they're looking for.
And that's an excellent point, because I'm a firm believer, and always have been, in servant leadership, that you serve before you lead. And I'll bet each one of you worked to help somebody else before you chose to run. And so for all the millennials that are watching today, what advice would you give them if they ultimately want to get involved and run for office?
I would say to just surround yourself with people that believe in you, because I think to y'all's great points, it has to be for a cause, and it has to be for something much bigger than yourself. But then, even as a young person, you are consistently brought down. People are saying you can't do this. There's so many roadblocks. In politics, there could be so many things like money and endorsements and fighting incumbents. But I think you have to surround yourself with people that believe in you and certainly believe in the cause bigger than you. And then when you're in that position of leadership, don't forget the other people that are still younger, that are trying to be like you and helping propel them and their ideas to the table.
I think one thing to highlight is that there is absolutely no substitute for preparation. Hard work and preparation are requisites to public service. And so, despite whatever, you can be much older and not be prepared adequately and not be willing to work as hard as you need to work. And I think ultimately, if you internalize those two ingredients, you really will have keys to success in terms of how to deliver service in the way that people deserve.
And the best and most impactful thing I did to actually get involved in politics was when I was 14 years old. I jumped into a congressional campaign. And then the same thing a couple years later. And so by actually getting behind a candidate and seeing that, in my opinion, is probably one of the most effective ways of actually getting policy changes accomplished, is by being able to shape the message that a congressional candidate is going out there and saying to the people.
And so you weren't just writing checks, you were actually working.
I was not
14?
writing checks at all. No, I was writing policy. I was going door to door as a young person, making phone calls. And it adds a different energy when you see a young person come into the mix. Say, this is cross-generational.
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
new.
I
It's
can see
fresh.
it be very valuable. Very
Absolutely.
valuable.
But what we've noticed too, at least in Republican primaries, is there's just been a real wave in the State House, at least, for younger folks, for a Briscoe Kane or a Mays Middleton who's looking at running against what we would call establishment Republicans and having success.
Yeah.
Right?
And I don't know if you guys have witnessed that, but that's what I'm starting to see in primaries, and really in primaries more than anything. Is that what y'all are witnessing?
I think that's accurate to say. The Republican Party has had more success with actually getting young people to the forefront of their party. I mean, look at the National Party. You have Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, relatively young compared to Mitch McConnell. But then look at the Democrats, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton.
You raise a great point. I want to touch on that, because that seems to be a real debate in the Democratic Party right now in terms of leadership, and do they need younger leadership? Address that point. Anyone?
I think it's not about age. I think it's about ideas and ability to execute a vision that people want to get behind. And I think that can manifest itself differently. I mean, certainly we had someone named President Barack Obama who got legions of people behind him because of the vision he set forth and an ability to execute that. And I think you have to look at it in terms of outcomes rather than look at it from a vantage point of you fit this particular demographic and therefore you fit the mold. I think the mold is problematic, whatever that is. It needs to be something that can transcend any type of mold and really kind of penetrate to a deeper cause or deeper calling among American people.
Right. Robert Kennedy has a great quote, and it is that, and I'm paraphrasing, the world needs the qualities of youth, not a state of time, but a state of mind. And I think that's something that really needs to be brought to the forefront. Barack Obama was a relatively young president historically. And I do think that the Democrats need to bring in fresh blood, fresh perspective, new eyes to look at all the issues we're facing. The Republicans have done a very good job at that.
I will say, sorry, but I will say too that what the Republicans have done, which was quite unique, is when Speaker Ryan got into office, he has propelled younger members to the table. So I would challenge the Democratic Party to say that there does need to be a push for the mantle of leadership to shift to younger members, to get them in the spotlight, and to give them the leadership opportunities to really expose themselves to different parts of the country, different issues. I do think the Republican Party has done a great job of that. I think of Elise Stefanik, who was a former member of Maverick PAC. She's the youngest elected representative ever in the history of Congress, and she's a female, the youngest elected female, and she is the current youngest member. And so it's neat to see where these members are being pushed to, again, given that we're in leadership, but I still think it's unique that the Republican Party has done that.
Well, they also had Aaron Schock, who went down in flames with a financial scandal. Republican congressman, very young, I think the youngest member at the time. So,
Yeah,
you know,
it's kind of a playboy.
to your point, age is not really the defining factor. It's really wisdom, experience, and what you're willing to bring to the table.
Well, there's a couple of beliefs that I wanted to talk about, because if we continue down this partisan line, I'm going to be defensive, and I'm going to get mad. I'm going to get mad at Jared. And, the other two things that I noticed was that millennials are really very interested in climate change and really much believers in the fact that it's real and that it has human causes and that it's a threat to the planet. And the other thing that I noticed is that they are more likely to be supportive of programs that assist the poor in rising up, and no matter, I'm not saying give the store away, but they're concerned about their less fortunate people in our economy.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think I'm right about that?
I think for purposes of the issue of poverty, I think that's one of the most complicated issues of our time that we have yet to tackle. And especially when you think about how complicated urban poverty is. And so at the city, I've been working very closely with Mayor Turner on an initiative called Complete Communities, where we're looking for to untangle some of these issues that relate to perpetually under-resourced areas. So what opportunities for upward mobility are you affording the existing residents in the community? Rather than simply gentrifying the area, you can make improvements to the area, but then also make sure that there are opportunities for those that are in the area to stay in the area rather than be displaced. And so that's one of those holistic approaches that also takes into account also that we are all connected. And so whether you live on east side, west side, north or south, if you have a high income bracket or a low one, it all impacts the bottom line for the city of Houston ultimately, because these are the people who makes up our city. And so we've been working on that and are launching actually a series of meetings concerning that with our pilot communities.
And Ben, you have been far more familiar with technology than I have, given your youth. So we have Facebook, Google, and Twitter. They're now under severe scrutiny for having allowed the Russians and fake news to disrupt our democracy and what it stands for. What type of regulations can you see going forward that might restrain these influences, these negative influences that have been so damaging?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, it's a unique question about privacy, and there's so many different issues, and certainly the role it played in the election. How I think about it, the impact on millennials, David, which I think is an interesting concept. Kirsten Soltis Anderson, who wrote a book called The Selfie Vote, and she was, again, a member of Maverick, but she talked a lot about how millennials actually decipher a bulk of our politics and our information through Facebook and through Twitter. So I'll be curious to see kind of the legislation that comes about and what happens after the hearings, of which I think started last week. Because it's going to play a huge role in millennials and how we source information and the quality of the information that we receive.
Well, I think it's going to lead to a even further disenfranchisement of young people from the electoral process. I mean, if we're getting information saying that, just ridiculous, outlandish fake news that we saw on Facebook, on Twitter, That's what young people are reading. That's where we get our information from.
We don't want them to read the
Well,
bad stuff.
but it's coming and it's being paid with rubles, and it's coming in from Russia and the oligarchs. But let's get back to the question I think we kind of paved over, and this is something that happens a lot in our political process, is that we always, when we talk about climate change, we always get away from climate change. The reason that young people, and I tell you this, every young person I've ever talked to involved in politics, 100% believes that climate change is real, it's happening, and it's causing devastating effects. We know that. We saw that here in Houston, Hurricane Harvey, 51 inches of rain in a number of days. That's just on average. I mean, disastrous. Never happened before. I believe it was a 500 to 1,000-year flood. We have lived through the devastating effects of climate change, which is why we all believe in it.
But do they debate, though, the underlying cause of climate change?
Well, there's a number.
That's not uniform, is it?
I don't know about that. That's something that needs to be explored. But I do believe that the man-made impacts of climate change are a credible belief right now of young people.
Y'all have been great guests, and I hate to close it. I'll leave you with this. A famous director of Whiplash and Get Out says, "Millennials love horror movies." And with that, we thank you for being here, and please see us next week here on Red, White, and Blue.